my name is Jennifer Matos. I'm the Executive Director of the Noah Webster House in West Hartford Historical Society, and I'm bringing you the 33rd Armchair Tour of West Hartford history. I wonder how many of you have noticed this house up here on the hill on New Britain Avenue as you were driving by. This is called the Sarah Whitman Hooker House, and it has been a fixture here in West Hartford since around 1715, which would make it the oldest house still standing here in town. It starts with a man named Ensign Timothy Seymour. He built the house between 1715 and 1720, and when he built it, it was really a two-room structure. Then by 1730, his son had added on to the building, and he particularly added on one room that could be accessed from the outside. He applied for a tavern keeper's license and was able to have a tavern here as kind of a side gig to his farm. The house was really perfectly situated to serve as a tavern because of its location here on New Britain Avenue. New Britain Avenue has been a thoroughfare for centuries and would have been an important route for people who were going to Hartford and back for business. Now, in 1770, a new couple moves into the house. Their names are Thomas Hart Hooker and Sarah Whitman Hooker, which is where the house gets its name from. Thomas Hart Hooker was from Farmington. Sarah Whitman Hooker was right here from the West Division of Hartford, and her father was John Whitman. Their house actually still stands on North Main Street. An important thing to know about John Whitman is that in addition to being a wealthy merchant and an important member of West Hartford society, he also was a slave owner. So we know that when Sarah Whitman was growing up, she actually had enslaved people in her home. And this is important to know because when Thomas Hart Hooker and Sarah Whitman Hooker move into this house, they have with them an enslaved man named Bristow. I'm sure you're all familiar with the name Bristow, as one of our middle schools is named after him. And Bristow was known in town as an agricultural expert. So he would have been very instrumental in helping the Hooker family run this very large farm that they had here. Now, between 1770 and 1775, Thomas Hart Hooker and Sarah Whitman Hooker have two children. As we get to 1775, we are on the eve of the American Revolution. We know that the West Division overall is very patriotic and siding with the Patriot cause rather than the British cause. And at that time, the town in Elmwood in particular plants trees, elm trees, which were called Liberty trees. They were representing the ideals of the American Revolution. And in fact, on this site, it is said that Bristow planted an elm tree. We have a photograph of the house with the elm tree many, many years later that I'll post along with this video. But what a sense of irony there must have been for Bristow, who went about planting this Liberty tree at a time when he himself was not at liberty. However, things were about to change for him. In 1775, around May, Thomas Hart Hooker was going to be heading off to join the Continental Army. And around that time, Bristow was able to purchase his freedom from the Hooker family. He wasn't given his freedom, he purchased it for a sum of 60 pounds. We wonder how Bristow was able to raise that much money. He was able to by hiring himself out to do other work for other farmers after he was finished with his work for the Hooker family. So by the summer of 1775, Thomas Hart Hooker has left the area to join the army. Bristow might still be around helping out, but if he is, it's as a free man. And around that time, Sarah Whitman Hooker is approached by the governor of Connecticut, Governor Jonathan Trumbull, to actually house some British prisoners. So there are two British citizens, Colonel Philip Skene and his son, Captain Andrew Skene. They had actually been sent to Philadelphia to be envoys to the Continental Congress. While they were there, they were offered the chance to change over to the American side. They refused and thus became prisoners. They were sent up to the New Haven area. No one really wanted to pay for their passage back to England, so instead, Governor Trumbull asked Sarah Whitman Hooker if she would basically take care of them under house arrest. So the Skeens actually gave their parole, which means they pledged that they would not try to escape, and they stayed here under house arrest for about 6 months. During that time, there was a plot by the townspeople who, as we said, were very patriotic, to actually tar and feather the Skeens. Luckily, Sarah Whitman Hooker intervened and stopped that from happening, and it's important to note that she did vouch for their safekeeping, so she was duty-bound to ensure their safety while they stayed with her. After they left, a few years later, Sarah Whitman Hooker remarries to a man named Captain Seth Collins. She lives in the house until 1794, and at that time she hands the house over to her kids. The house was lived in by many different people over the years, and notably one owner of the house was a man named Charles M. Beach. Charles M. Beach is best known for owning Vine Hill Farm, and he actually owned all four corners of the intersection of Main Street and New Britain Avenue, which included this house. So during that time, he actually would have used this house as a boarding house for his farm workers. Once we get to the 1970s, the house comes into the possession of the town of West Hartford, and a foundation is formed, the Sarah Whitman Hooker Foundation, and led by a woman named Frances Franson, to restore the house back to the time period of when Sarah Whitman Hooker lived here. The house today is managed by Frances Franson's children, Martha and Carl Franson, as well as the Sarah Whitman Hooker chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. It is open for tours by appointment, and you can go to their website, which is sarahwhitmanhooker.com, to learn more about that opportunity. So the next time you're driving by on New Britain Avenue, I hope you'll take a moment to kind of look up and see this very historic home that has been here for 300 years. Now you know a little bit more about the story, and I hope you learned something new. I'll see you next week.